Hi everyone, thanks for joining our webinar. My name's Sarah Carter. I'm a research associate from WRI's Global Forest Watch, and along with Johannes, I'm the co-leader of the GFOI R&D component on deforestation alerts. So thanks for joining us. I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes or a few seconds for people to join. I think I can still see that people are joining the webinar. So thanks for joining us if you've just joined us. Today we're going to have some presentations followed by a discussion session. So feel free to already start introducing yourself into the chat. Say where you're from, what your name is. I've got a couple of housekeeping items just before we start. We don't have translation for this webinar. It's going to be in English, but I hope everyone can join in a lively discussion. We're trying to get this to be a global dialogue, so focusing on English for this one. We do have one of the speakers who's going to present in Spanish. We'll have a short translation. It's a short presentation, short translation afterwards in English. We've also got slides available in English as well. So just stay on the line and follow the presentation as best you can. And like I said, we'll have a translation afterwards. We've got some speakers lined up, as I mentioned. But before that, I'm very interested to know who is joining us on the call. So please, if you can, log into Slido. You just go to slido.com in your web browser, and then you put in the number there. And it would be great to see what kind of organization you're from. As soon as people get to Slido and start putting in the number into their browser, I should start seeing where people are from. Well, yeah, that's expected. I know we have some research organizations who are going to present, UN, international organizations, governments. Nice to see some private sector as well, international NGOs. I'll just give people a few more minutes. It's interesting to see what kind of institutions are represented here. I'll just let people log into Slido. Just give a minute before I move on to the next question. So like I mentioned, this is a GFOI R&D Exchange. It's the first one in a series on different topics. Today's topics is on deforestation alerts, and we really want to dive deeper into what alerts are available, how people are using them in practice, and how we can improve the impact of the alerts. So that's just some questions for you to start thinking about. I'm going to move to the next one. What best represents your relationship with deforestation alerts? Are you a data provider, an end user? You're involved in capacity building, maybe a system developer? If you're in Slido, you should see that the question has changed, so you can put in a new answer. Okay. I think the not yet interested participant is because I tested it. Yeah, that's better. Yesterday, so that was someone testing it already. But good, I see that we have a lot of different user groups, producers represented. That's great to see. I think that'll really enable us to dig deeper in all the perspectives on alert systems, whether you're from the data side or from the end user. And of course, capacity building, yeah, really great to see that they're represented too. I'm going to go to the next question, just to get people thinking about what the main barriers to creating impact is from deforestation alert. You should be able to put just an open-ended answer into Slido. Maybe you need more time to think about this. Yeah, that's a good point. Action following alerts. That's what we need to create impact. But I think this is something we can dive into in the discussion. So it'd be good to know what your thoughts are on the barriers. We can talk about how to overcome those barriers. We can talk about what actions needed from those community groups, which we saw represented: the capacity builders, the data providers, the end users, the system producers, and so on. I think maybe there are many barriers. Perhaps some are related to the data quality, connectivity issues, very interesting. Some maybe are related, I can see, to the institutional arrangements. How do we ensure avoiding corruption policy? Yeah, this is all really useful information. And I think we can focus on some of these points, like I said, in the discussion session. Nice. I'm just going to stop there. But like I said, do think about these barriers. What you'll notice in your Zoom layout is that there's a question and answers as well as a chat. So you can introduce yourself, like I mentioned earlier, maybe for those who've joined late in the chat. Let us know what your name is and what organization you're from. And then in the question and answer, please put the questions that you would like us to discuss in the discussion. Like I mentioned, I hope everyone can be actively involved. We'd love to hear from you, what your thoughts are. And then if you have questions for any of the speakers, as you see, I've got the list of speakers on the slide. You can also write something in the question and answer, and they might just respond immediately to that. So especially if it's a specific question about what they've presented. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. That's Johannes Reicher. As I mentioned, he's the co-organizer of the GFOI R&D Deforestation Alert group, and he's going to present one of the reasons we are having this webinar. That's some new guidance which is put together on the alerts and some background to that. So Johannes from Wageningen University, please go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Sarah, for introducing me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening also from my side. I will give a bit of an introduction to deforestation alerts and introduce the new guidance material. I think we all recognize that satellite remote sensing really has evolved as the major tool to monitor forest at scale. And already for, I think, at least the last decade, we can track annual forest dynamics, loss and gain operationally at national to global scale. What we have seen over the last 5 years is an increasing availability of free and open optical and radar satellite data that provides information at temporally dense detail and also at high spatial scale, 5 to 10 meter data. And the data is now also analysis ready, so we can immediately analyze imagery. A second development we have seen is the availability of cloud computing and analysis systems. So systems that don't only provide the computational power, but that also host the satellite archive. So that now allow us to run algorithms in the cloud and with that analyze new satellite images as soon as they were acquired in near real time. And those developments are really the basis for near real-time deforestation alerting. So analyze images, new satellite images, as soon as they were acquired. And we have now seen the development of a number of deforestation alert systems at national scale in countries like Peru, Brazil, but also in Gabon, Laos. And we also have seen the development of some pan-tropical global alert systems that are openly available, such as the CLUD alerts from the University of Maryland. Here's an example that you see from the radar-based RUT alerts that show how we can now track, for example, roads and selective logging, but there's also the new DIST alerts, JJ-FAST from JAXA, or the Luca alerts from the group from Sasan Sachi. We have also now seen more and more integrated alert systems that combine the advantages of several alert systems, since those alert systems are not competitive, but they are complementary, that combine the advantages of those in one integrated alert, and with this increase the detection speed and the confidence in the alerts that were detected. And examples are the Global Forest Watch integrated alert, Mapiomas, and also the Borneo Atlas. And a third type of deforestation alerts are now deforestation predictions, so actually early warning signals, so systems that predict or locate hotspots that are likely to be deforested in the near future. And one example is the Forest Foresight system from WWF. Several studies have also assessed the impact of using alerts, and there is a strong financial and environmental impact. Of course, the environmental impact of potential reduced deforestation, everyone knows, but that also comes with a strong financial impact, positive impact. And it also leads to increased transparency of what's going on in forest. And that helps to stimulate the public debate and awareness, but also helps national organizations to support their work and the importance of their work. How are deforestation alerts commonly used? So first of all, of course, new satellite images were acquired and they're analyzed, and potential deforestation alerts are detected. Then in a second step, alerts are often analyzed. So for example, multiple alerts are integrated and alerts are prioritized. So which of all the alerts that were detected are actually important for us to follow up? For example, someone close to a national reserve that is important to look at, or close to, for example, commodities, palm oil. And this is then prioritized, and then those prioritized alerts are shared with regional offices or communities or other actors that want to follow up via web platforms. We see it apps, but also in cases still paper reports. And then the hard part follows, the law enforcement, the actual actions on the ground to try to stop illegal activities. And then this is repeated. So we have a producer side on developing, producing alerts, and also some of the alert analysis is part of that. And at that side, we actually see that we have consolidated methods, consolidated alerts already, and quite some experience. Where it gets much harder is the user side. There we see much more challenges and also varying experiences. So actually, I think we've seen it on the inventory. I think, you know, moving from alerts to impact is really a long way. Producing the alert is one part, but actually using them and institutionalizing alerts so that they can also be used to follow up in the field on them, that is very hard. And I think this is where self-exchange is needed. That's nothing the alert producers can provide, that experience. That really needs to come from the countries. And we really hope that this exercise and this webinar can be also a good starting point to connect some countries so they can exchange their experience. A second component I want to briefly mention is actually how do these alerts fit in national forest monitoring. We're going to countries who have seen that is sometimes not 100% clear. So at one point we have the purpose of national reporting, where we really require unbiased forest area estimates that are then used as activity data for carbon stock assessment. And here the tool is really a satellite-based annual forest change mapping, something we already have available, that is then used to stratify and sample and so on. And for that, we have really good guidelines in place already. We have a lot of experience. We have guidelines how to institutionalize it, how to do that statistically robust. On the other side, this is a different purpose, is really the reduction of illegal or unwanted forest activities. And for this, we need timely information on newly evolving events. Here, the correct or the complete area detection is not so important. Secondary, we want to detect new events timely. The tool, of course, are deforestation alerts, and guidelines are evolving. There's not really a lot of community accepted standards out there. And there's little experience about institutional use, alert prioritization, validation. So there's really a need for exchange and guidelines. And therefore, Silver Carbon has done a number of regional workshops over the past 3 years across the tropics that were focused on deforestation alerts and to collect also input for a guidance document. And we have now released this guidance document, I think last week. The nice thing is that it received a good community review to safeguard the quality. And I think it will also be shared in the chat now. It contains 2 key parts. The first is a few pages on guidance, some overview of key terminology. So what is actually a difference between a near real-time alert and an early warning system? Some considerations of having a national implementation for an alert versus using one of these openly available global or pan-tropical alert systems. Some examples, information on how to use the alerts, and also considerations for producing alerts. And the second part, which I find the most exciting parts, are really these country case examples that show for some of the cases the challenges those country faces, how they address them, and also some next steps. And new use cases will also be added in the coming year. And I think this can be a good starting point again for this, for some collaboration and exchange. And with this, I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to see the country presentations.
Great, thanks, Johannes. So just to add to that, as Johannes mentioned, the link to the documentation which he presented is available in chat, so please have a look for that. You can either use the first link and then you have to navigate below to see the MGD module, or you can use the direct link, which is the second one in the chat that Madison shared. And then we also mentioned country examples. So this is really what's going to be the next part of the presentation. The guidance has several country examples, and we're going to look at some of those, or some examples of similar country examples. So for example, we have a case study in Ethiopia in the guidance, but today we're going to hear a very similar presentation from Louis. So Louis, if you'd like to put your video on and unmute yourself. Louis from CIAT is going to present about near real-time alerts for protecting forests under participatory forest management in Ghana.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen well?
I can't see your screen just yet.
Oh. You do it again.
Yeah, and then if you just put the presentation view. Yeah, perfect.
All good. So hello everyone, I'm Louis Remondin. I'm a senior scientist at the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT, where I call it the data-driven sustainability team. I've been working with the Alliance for 18 years, and I'm now based in Montpellier, France. So the work I'm going to present today, which we call Landscape for Cocoa Livelihood, is a proof of concept for conservation model that we have developed to enable private sector to directly fund community-led PES schemes, so payment for ecosystem services schemes. In this case, the private sector is Mondelez. Basically, the project was implemented in 4 different steps of about a year each. First, we did a landscape and stakeholders analysis to try to identify where the project could be implemented, finding a place with ongoing deforestation, but where there was still a reasonably good reserve of ecosystem services, where there was no high-risk activities like ongoing minings and things like that we cannot manage through PES. And finally, where the local communities were receptive to the idea of payment for ecosystem services, finally, we found this area in the Tano-Ofin Forest Reserve in Ghana, in the Ashanti region. Second, we designed the PS together with the community, defining everything from the governance structure, the reward structure, the PES reporting protocols, how to check the alerts on the ground, and so on. Third, we implemented the design for a year. And now we are at the fourth year, looking at the issues that happened during the first year, reflecting back, trying to tweak some things in the model, and start scaling up to new areas. So as I said, the whole design of the PES scheme was an iterative and co-design together with the communities, together with the local authorities, and so on, and all the relevant stakeholders, involving interviews, workshops, community forums, and focus group discussions, and so on, really to try to find a structure that worked locally. We've also designed all the conservation areas together with the communities, where basically we identified up to where the community were able to go deep, how deep inside the forest they can go. Also identifying all important landmarks in the landscape within and outside of the forest. So we could also translate the findings from the remote sensing into maybe more local maps or more local vocabulary. And finally, we also trained certain community members called the accountability team to use tablets to receive alerts and report their finding from the field using the QGIS software. So basically, a few members that said they were interested to participate, a few members, mainly cocoa growers, were trained to use the tablet and go directly to the field to find out what is happening. So this is the final structure or protocol to report on alerts that were developed. Basically, both the local authorities, so the Forestry Commission, the official authorities, and the accountability team receive the alerts, but first the accountability team, so the local community, goes to the field. They check what was happening. They checked if the legality of the forest loss and so on, and they give all their feedback to the Forest Management Committee, which is a group of leaders of the different committees that are involved, which then report back to the forest guard that will take action, keep documentation of what happened following the alerts and following the reports from the community, the management community. And finally, the findings of the forest guard are relayed to the central forestry commissions and the technical officers, rangers, and so on, to finally document everything that's what's happening and that happened, and to take decision on what should be the action to be taken. So in 1 year, we had 99 deforestation alerts, of which about 58% were generated by farming and 36% by selective logging. The overall accuracy of the system was 97%, and basically the system is based on Sentinel-1 data, so radar data. It's very similar to what can be found in Global Forest Watch and so on, but with the advantage that it can be calibrated for project sites. So basically, it's not a global system, but a more localized system. But that works in a very similar way than all the systems that are found globally. And the results is that deforestation was 71% less than what was projected if nothing was done in the region, and compared to historical deforestation trend, which is very good. But we are still based on the reward scheme that was developed with the communities and the private sector that were funding the project. We are still in the third tier of reward, which is $2,000 for this year. Now the communities are discussing how they will invest those $2,000 into things that serves all the communities. The plan is to save this money over several years, maybe 2 years or 3 years, aiming for a higher tier reward, and improve a health facility that is within one of the central communities. So there's still work to do, but 71% decrease is already a very good score. And yeah, that's basically what we've done in Ghana, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Great, thanks, Louis, for that interesting presentation. As I mentioned, you can read about some other use cases in the guidance materials which Johannes presented, including a SEAP project in Ethiopia, which has a very similar structure to this one. And in future, we could expand those use cases. We have 8 use cases at the moment to include, for example, this one in Ghana. And if other people have use cases they would like us to include, then we'd love to hear from you. And we have a template for including new examples. So now to move on to the next use case, we have the National Program for the Conservation of Forests for Climate Change Mitigation in Peru. And Daniel, if you could switch on your camera and then we can see you, and unmute your microphone, and then the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Sara. Buenos días desde Perú a todos. Bueno, ya lo mencionó Sara, yo soy el jefe del área de monitoreo acá en el Programa Nacional de Conservación de Bosques para la Mitigación del Cambio Climático en el Ministerio del Ambiente, y les voy a mostrar un poco el uso, la generación, la distribución y el uso de la información de alertas tempranas que tenemos en el programa. Siguiente, por favor. Next. Next. Como ya les mencioné, nosotros somos generadores de nuestra propia información de alertas. Hace varios años estuvimos trabajando con el equipo de Global Forest Watch, con las alertas en los años iniciales de la Universidad de Maryland, hasta el año 2016-17, en que ya decidimos dar nuestros propios pasos, aprender poco de la experiencia y generar nuestras propias alertas, tener una plataforma para distribuir también la información y llegar hacia los usuarios directamente, ¿no? Nosotros tenemos siempre una mirada mucho de usuario, porque lo que buscamos es que la información sirva para una acción, ¿no? Ese es el objetivo final de la información de alerta temprana, ¿no? Siguiente, por favor. Next. Por eso decimos que nosotros generamos información, generamos a partir de imágenes Landsat. Desde el año 2017 venimos generando información de alertas de forma continua. Nosotros desarrollamos una metodología a partir del año 2017, la hemos ido mejorando en el tiempo. Ahí pueden ver el link para que descarguen justamente el artículo científico de la metodología. Y bueno, la información de alertas la publicamos periódicamente en nuestra plataforma GeoBosques, que también pueden verla ahí. Y lo que buscamos es no solo publicar la información, sino buscamos que el usuario tenga una facilidad para poder explotar esta información, ¿no? O sea, sacarle un mejor provecho. Entonces, el usuario se registra, puede hacer seguimientos a áreas específicas y puntuales que sean de su interés, y recibirlas al correo electrónico. Y esto es todo lo que, digamos, buscamos como generadores, distribuidores, y justamente llegar al usuario final de la información. Siguiente, por favor. Ok, entonces ya yendo a la distribución un poco, la distribución lo hacemos a través de la plataforma GeoBosques. Uno se puede suscribir, es de libre acceso a la información, cualquiera, en cualquier lado puede hacer un seguimiento si deseas por un área de límite que nosotros decimos de división política, es decir, por un departamento, una provincia, un distrito o alguna categoría en el territorio que tenga un derecho asignado. Hemos buscado que recopilar cierta información, por ejemplo, un área natural protegida, tú te puedes suscribir, una concesión, a veces es un poquito complicado tener actualizada toda esta data de base de datos, pero ahí vamos avanzando. Pero si quieres, si eres un usuario un poquito más especializado, tú mismo puedes cargar tu área de interés, ¿no? Tienes tu polígono, la cargas a la plataforma y te va a llegar periódicamente un correo donde vamos a ir avisando si hay o no alertas en el área que estés buscando. Y puedes suscribirte por 1, 2, 10, 100 áreas si deseas, no hay ningún problema. Entonces vas a tener la información a la mano al momento que encontremos justamente que identifiquemos una alerta. Siguiente, por favor. Este es un ejemplo simple de cómo, en forma resumida, cómo ves la plataforma, cómo te puedes suscribir con tu correo electrónico, fácilmente un usuario que tú eliges, te suscribes directamente, siguiente por favor, y la información te va a llegar a tu correo electrónico por todas las áreas de interés que te has suscrito. Este es un ejemplo, ahí pueden ver hacia la izquierda ya, como decir, la pantalla personalizada del usuario, donde están todas las áreas de interés y este es un zoom a una de las áreas de interés donde se han identificado un grupo de nuevas alertas. Publicamos alertas más o menos cada 21 días. Vamos publicando nuevas alertas. Siguiente, por favor. Y mientras vas haciendo zoom a tus áreas, vas a ir justamente viendo dónde se van encontrando. Pero lo bueno que también tienes ahí como información base los datos de pérdida de bosque que hemos tenido, que tenemos históricamente también en la plataforma. Es decir, toda la información interactúa entre sí y puedes ver justamente cómo va avanzando el problema de pérdida de cobertura de bosques como usuario ya personalizado en tus áreas de interés, ¿no? Siguiente, por favor. También hemos buscado que los servicios de Planet que están libres y los de, por ejemplo, que hemos adquirido como Sentinel Hub, también los hemos puesto en la plataforma para que el usuario tenga una mayor facilidad de poder corroborar, verificar justamente el estado de sus alertas y eso ayuda justamente a que puedas tener una información rápida a la mano. Siguiente. Entonces, como les decía, nosotros buscamos que llegar a los usuarios directos de la información, directos e indirectos también. Directos para nosotros son los que están en el territorio y los que van a hacer que justamente el problema de pérdida de bosques se reduzca, ¿no? Que tomen una acción para una decisión. Pero también buscamos que ir a los demás actores, los actores indirectos, quizás aquellos que buscan hacer control, que son, por ejemplo, operadores de justicia, o a la academia también, ¿no? Porque es importante que la información tenga diverso uso, ¿no? Tomar control de tomar acción respecto al problema propiamente, pero también de manera indirecta a los operadores de justicia, donde ya en el tiempo, en el caso peruano, han aprendido un poco, por ejemplo, a explotar mejor la información, a, por ejemplo, hacer un pedido de información específico basado en coordenadas, basado en áreas. Antes a veces ni se tomaba en cuenta esta información. Entonces ya es de mucha utilidad y sirve para tomar acciones de forma un poquito más rápida, ¿no? Entonces, pues la información no solo sirve para una plataforma, no solo sirve para mirar estadísticas, sino sirve para tomar decisiones, para tomar acciones y justamente lo que todos buscamos en el fondo, reducir el problema, ¿no? Siguiente. En resumen, esto es lo que hacemos como Programa Nacional de Conservación de Bosques y gestores de la plataforma GeoBosques. Generamos la información, la distribuimos de forma gratuita para cualquier usuario, experto o no experto. La información está acceso en varios formatos, desde formatos raster, vector, inclusive hasta estadísticos, solamente visuales si deseas ver algo nada más. Y lo que buscamos como siguiente paso es justamente el uso y la acción, ¿no? En los usuarios que están principalmente en el territorio y en aquellos que tienen justamente el mandato de gestionar el bosque. Siguiente. Estos son unos casos de ejemplos que tenemos, por ejemplo, con comunidades nativas con quienes nosotros a veces también tenemos un trabajo bastante directo. Generamos también reportes específicos a partir de las alertas, capacitamos mucho también, y estamos buscando que a través, por ejemplo, de las organizaciones indígenas puedan tener la capacidad, o sea, su brazo técnico hacia estas comunidades, porque quizás son los que menos acceso puedan tener a la información, ¿no? Para las entidades públicas, privadas, les es un poco más fácil, pero, digamos, aquellos actores en el territorio como comunidades es mucho más complicado. Entonces, las organizaciones indígenas son un brazo, digamos, útil para que ellos puedan tener esa información y capacitar a sus técnicos, especialistas, ayuda mucho. Son ejemplos de cómo buscamos que el uso de la información justamente sea efectivo. Siguiente. También, por ejemplo, tenemos mucha demanda de información a partir de, por ejemplo, actores relacionados con el control, con el Ministerio Público, las fiscalías ambientales, ya conocen de la información, saben qué pedir, cómo pedir, saben que para pedir una información se necesitan coordenadas para analizar áreas específicas. Entonces, lo que buscamos es también entrenar a estos usuarios, ¿no? No solo generamos, distribuimos, y ya en la línea de el uso de la información, algo que hacemos mucho es entrenar justamente a estos actores para que sepan cómo sacarle un mejor provecho a la información y ahí poder tener, digamos, un mayor acercamiento hacia ellos, ¿no? Siguiente. Otros actores a nivel regional, por ejemplo, los gobiernos regionales que son, digamos, las autoridades propias en sus regiones, en sus ámbitos, también están siendo entrenados, tienen las capacidades técnicas para justamente sacarle el mejor provecho a la información y puedan decidir y tomar acciones ya en otros espacios, con los superiores de justicia, con aquellos que tienen que tomar, digamos, la acción en el territorio para controlar los eventos propiamente de deforestación que se puedan identificar, ¿no? Entonces, es importante, como les digo, cerrar el círculo, ¿no? Generar la información, ponerla a disposición de manera fácil, amigable al usuario y sobre todo a aquellos usuarios que no son tan expertos también y que sepan cómo acceder, qué cosa pueden sacar de esta información y qué cosa no, porque tampoco es información, digamos, perfecta, pero digamos que es lo que se busca, es que la información tenga un uso específico, ¿no? Siguiente. Bueno, y ese es de manera resumida y rápida, cómo nosotros como Programa Nacional de Conservación de Bosques, desde el Ministerio del Ambiente y un trabajo con otras entidades también, buscamos justamente generar esta información, ponerla a disposición de libre acceso y que todos puedan, digamos, sacarle el mejor provecho para una toma de decisiones y de acciones de manera adecuada y oportuna. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Daniel. Y si me permiten, puedo, y me escuchan, voy a compartir un resumen en inglés. So I was thanking Daniel for his intervention, and I wanted to give a brief summary for those that do not speak Spanish. So Daniel Castillo Soto, as head of the monitoring group of forest conservation in the Ministry of the Environment in Peru. Well, he presented a really impressive presentation on what MINAM has been doing in terms of deforestation alerts, and more specifically based on the platform in which they make these alerts accessible, which is also, it's called GeoBosques. So as part of Peru's history with deforestation alerts, they started in collaboration with a research institute. In this case, it was the University of Maryland. But of course, slowly and consistently, they decided to develop their own methods based on Landsat data, which they designed and published in 2017 and 2019. And within the platform itself, the main goal of their team was to generate a user-driven platform, which meant that the forest alerts would be available not only to generate statistics afterwards, but also to generate action on the ground. And that is why GeoBosques has been leveraged to be user-driven and and to be easily usable. And when the use of it is not that easy, then they also provide capacity building activities for indigenous communities, for regional governments, and also for procurement offices, so that they know how to access the platform, how to delineate what the area of interest is, and also how to receive the information of alerts as automatic email messages to their personal inbox. Finally, he also stated the importance of closing the circle between the technicalities and the implementation behind deforestation alerts for their effective use based on particular relevant user needs within Peru. So that is a summary. If I missed anything, please, anybody can write it in the chat. But I would like to thank Daniel once again for his presentation. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Yeah, thanks. So that's two great presentations which really explain how alerts can be used in practice, and really have very well described the whole operational system which is required to make the alerts usable. And I think that's been really great to hear about. You can read 6 other case studies, including from Brazil and Laos, in the guidance materials as well. And now I'm going to hand over to Eric Lindquist from FAO, who will talk about some tools for alert generation and customization and how they're used in practice from the FAO. Thank you. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. And cognizant of the time and wanting to leave as much time as possible for discussion, because I think that's where the really richness can come from. I'm going to cut my presentation quite short. I just want to say that, and Johannes touched on it briefly, that the purpose of alerts, and if you're interested in creating alerts, if you're interested in generating an alert system or using alerts that exist globally, you know, we have to be really careful about whether we're interested in actually doing area assessment or the difference, understanding the difference between area assessment or annual forest monitoring schemes or biannual forest monitoring schemes versus just wanting to know if something is happening in an area as quickly as possible. And so oftentimes the methods that are used for alerts are quite good at indicating activity as soon as possible, but the process to go through to create an area assessment and all that requires is again a step above the actual alert generation. And I think I just covered that point again in terms of do we want to enable immediate action? Do we want to monitor someplace really closely for any sort of disturbance, or do we want to produce accurate and precise accounting statistics? They can be used. I mean, you can make use of alerts for that accounting, precise accounting, but there are additional steps that need to go into that. We also at FAO we work a lot with trying to get near real-time alerts into the right hands, into the hands of people that can do things about it, or that can apply their local knowledge, their local expertise to the context of the alert generation. And therefore we generate tools that enable autonomous creation of alerts. So there are global alert products that one can download and use or view on screen and use. But there are also ways to create alerts yourself if you want to, and customize them for any environment or any cause, and we like to facilitate that. And that lets you define what is important to you and your values at risk, and customize the alert generation to those values. I think those are really important things that needs to be part of an alert system. I'm just going to go through these slides to think that we have tools and platforms for things like this. And if you're interested, I'll share this presentation with Sarah, and it'll be available for download, and you can look at these yourself. Just saying that we have methods for both use of optical data and radar data, including planet data, to generate alerts depending on what your environment is like and what you're trying to use them for. Again, this will be in the chat. And just to say, depending on the data, the input data you use to generate alerts, and again, depending on your requirement, do I need to know something is happening tomorrow, like today, is today important and is tomorrow important, depending on that time step that you're interested in, would dictate what kind of input data you might want to use for generating alerts, what kind of and depending on what kind of input data are available to you, your expectations should be, tempered, I guess, according to what kind of data exists, whether, some are only available on a monthly time step, that sort of thing. Just to say that also, yeah, that's really all I wanted to say, that alerts are important. They can be used to really inform action. That is an issue that we have everywhere in the world, but we're working on that, and it would be interesting to see also how people start integrating an alert system into a national forest monitoring system, and or a forest monitoring system for deforestation and degradation. If that's something that people are doing, that would be very interesting to hear about as well. A lot of the work I presented is part of the CEPL team with Andreas Wollrath, myself, and Daniel Veal, and thanks to so many people. But if you're interested in taking a look at this, here are the websites you can check out. And with that, Sarah, I will turn it back to you so that we can maximize time for discussion.
Great, thanks, Eric, and thanks for speeding through your presentation, but great to hear all those points and to hear about this useful tool which is available for everyone. So great that you were able to present that. So I'd just like to remind people that this is being recorded, but we hope that you can contribute freely to the discussion. We'd like to hear from everyone. Thanks to the presenters who have already been answering some of the questions in the chat. That's really great. But now I would just like to really open the floor for everyone to jump in, share your thoughts on what's being presented. We'd like to particularly hear about the challenges which you think still remain when making use of deforestation alert data. And maybe some of you, I've been watching the chat and seeing the wealth of experience which you represent as a group of people joining this call. So maybe you can also share your experiences in terms of how to overcome those challenges and barriers to making the most of alerts. But perhaps to kick off discussions, and it would be great if all the presenters could maybe turn on your camera and also be ready to jump into the discussion here. There's a question in the Q&A, which is, what can countries with limited resources do with the near real-time alert information, considering action on the ground is cost prohibitive? Would anyone like to elaborate? I see Daniel already answered that. Maybe someone would like to translate his answer and jump in with another suggestion for that.
As more suggestions are coming, I can just give a short translation, Sarah. So Daniel mentioned that this information can be really helpful for prioritizing spaces and also for control actions. And he raised the example of national park guards in national protected areas, which they use, the use of alerts come into their decision-making of how they prioritize where they will be doing their patrolling or walking through these protected national areas. So based on the presence of these alerts, then they will adapt their course.
Can I add maybe to that? So when we talk to countries, what we try to convey also with some countries say, okay, we would, and that is like fully understood, we want to implement our own system because we need that for ownership, and that makes a lot of sense. But if you have limited resources to start with, using these operationally available tools, such as available on Global Forest Watch, is something like test driving a car, a little bit to understand what you need for your circumstances to monitor, for example, your national park, or your country. Do you need a fancy integrated radar optical high-resolution planet-based alert, or is maybe an available Landsat-based alert sufficient for you? So that's an opportunity I really see with using these available systems. And then if you have experimented with it and maybe also talk to other countries, then you can make a decision based on what you can digest and also what you can stem as an institution. That's just something I wanted to add to this point.
Anyone else want to jump in from the panelists on that point?
Yeah, just quickly. So I would say that we also see a lot of examples, well, some examples from countries that you don't necessarily use alerts for sending park guards or law enforcement out, but just really just sort of to check on a more frequent basis whether some policy is working, some just like sort of an informal check as like, is something working here? We changed something, did it work, did it not? And it doesn't necessarily have to be sort of a law enforcement action, but it can be just sort of a something quicker than an annual update that gets you some additional information, some contextual information about what might be happening in a place, and it gives you that extra little bit of information to decide, do I want to go out to this place? Does somebody need to do something about this on a more frequent time step than annually or every 2 years kind of thing.
Yeah. Before we jump to the next question, what I really find an important comment, and I think it's good to clarify that maybe Eric and Sarah, you can do that, which I think the confusion, a lot of people have that. So which data platform for deforestation alert is more suitable for governmental forest authorities, CEPAL or Global Forest Watch? And I think maybe Eric, that they're not competing, or it's just they're very complementary. I think it depends really. In CEPAL allows you to produce your own alerts, and it's a system that allows you to generate data easily and supports that for country, while Global Forest Watch is a platform that collects a lot of data sets and also supports communities with training to use these data sets, a lot of outreach. So in that way, there's no better. They are very complementary. So as different alert systems are very complementary and not competitive. I find that an important point to make, and maybe Sarah or Eric have something to add, or someone else before we
say something. Yeah, thanks. That's a really good point. And indeed, we're not competing. And I think there's no one size fits all answer for everyone. And I think some people have different requirements for what they want. Some countries would like their own in-house system. We saw an example of how that can be done, how countries can create their own alerts. Some people, for example, journalists, we work with a lot of journalists and people who are more taking action, and they don't have the capacity to generate their own alerts and do the technical side of things. So having a product that's kind of ready to go and that's more easy to interact with limited technical skills is something that's more suitable. So I think indeed there's something for everyone, and people should I think, like Johannes said, test drive some options, look into it, see what your requirements are, ask for advice. And maybe some of these examples which we've shared have given you an idea about why people have chosen a particular option and how it works for them. And maybe that gives a bit of an idea about what might be the best solution for each person or group. I saw a number of questions about the EUDR, and I wonder if someone would like to address that question, because it's the big thing that's coming up. Would anyone like to say anything about alerts and EUDR?
Well, I think it's come back a little bit to what we were talking about, that there's like understanding what's happening in the landscape right now, but not being very precise. And then there's mirroring exactly what is ongoing and so on. And I think alerts of change are very important, for example, for risk mitigation or things like that within the value chains for private sector and so on. So you can understand better what's happening. You can maybe have quick actions on the ground to understand if certain farms of your community chains are involved in deforestation and so on. But I wouldn't use it as something for a claim of zero deforestation within a farm, or the opposite, that deforestation happened within a farm or something like this. just because the stakes are too high and the accuracy is not yet reached for this type of exact measurement of what's happening. But to have a general idea of what are the risks of working within a certain area and what are like the current risk and not last year's risks, alerts are perfect to do this type of job, I think.
You go ahead.
Yeah, can I just say so? I agree. So there, in my opinion, there are two ways to look at alerts in terms of the EUDR, and one is the way Louis just mentioned, and the other, I think, and I'm not sure that this has been done before, but it's something that comes to my mind as a way, something to try. It's hard to geolocate certain types of farms, right? Cocoa, coffee, plantation, these sorts of things are difficult sometimes to find in real time now. But what might be interesting is using this alert methodology, which is still just looking at change on a very frequent time step. You could apply that to past time periods. I mean, they wouldn't necessarily be, alerts that you could do anything about now, but they would be apply the methodology to past time periods and start to get a sense of maybe where a farm was created that has now been so integrated into the landscape now that it's difficult to find that plot or that location. So that could be used to prove one of the many things you need to prove for EUDR, either that farm is not default, but at least we would know that the better the location of a specific parcel.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's clear in the EUDR guidance from the Commission that they don't prescribe any particular data set for due diligence. But they do recommend that Earth observation or satellite derived data can be useful. So I think it's really up to the operator or the one who's doing the due diligence to really assess the utility of each data type. But I agree it can be useful for giving an indication of what's going on in the land on the plot of land. But further verification might be required, like field visits, and I think that should never be ruled out. I wonder if anyone else from the audience would like to jump in. If you would be interested in voicing a question or maybe responding to one of the questions which has been raised, then feel free to raise your hand. We'll have to unmute you manually. So if anyone would like to jump in, please do raise your hand and we'll try and unmute you and let you speak. In the meantime, would any of the presenters, I see some more questions coming in the Q&A box. Would anyone like to answer one of those live that's already come in, maybe one that's already been answered, or otherwise, there was a question about the validation of alerts, which I saw, which I think is a really interesting question, and maybe someone would like to provide some more information about how that can be done.
I think, Louis, you were just typing. Maybe you can also answer verbally.
Yeah, sure. So
for your specific case, I think it was a question for the specific example of Ghana, how were they validated?
I can go ahead. So there's many ways to validate these alerts. In the case of Ghana, well, first we did an internal validation process mainly based on planet imagery and higher resolution imagery. So we looked at before, after images and checked that the changes that we observed really happened, or could be seen in optical imagery with higher resolution and that kind of things. And then basically we have, as I explained, the accountability team and the forest guards that goes to the alert sites. Basically, they receive indication through GPS, but they also receive indication based on the landmarks that were identified during the participatory mapping. So basically, it's first go to the tree X or go to the lake X or something like that, and from there we take them to the alerts based on GPS indication. And they need to go to the sites, they need to take pictures, they have to register GPS coordinates so we can really check that they are indeed in the area that we want to check. What else? They need to fill a simple form like, is there still activities ongoing? Can you see what was the reason of the change? Are there people on sites and things like that? And all of this is packaged into the software, sent back to us through the cloud when they have a connection, and from there we can also do statistics and that kind of things. But for our own sake also, and to understand better, we also checked the quality of the alerts based on higher resolution data and that kind of thing.
Great, thanks for that explanation. That was really helpful. I see a hand up, Kalkiran Mulatu. Could we unmute Kalkiran? I think you can speak now. Please go ahead, introduce yourself and ask your question or join in the discussion.
Thank you, Sarah, and all the presenters. My name is Kalkiran. I am with the Alliance Biodiversity and CIAD, based in the Addis Ababa office. First of all, thank you for publishing the Ethiopia case as well as part of the GFOI experience. I wanted to comment on two things. One is on the validation, which was just raised, and you can see it as part of the use case. But what we found quite efficient was also to engage colleagues and partners operating on the field. So at the lowest administrative level and at the participatory forest management level, we have trained people on GIS and remote sensing techniques, but also on alerts specific to those that we are using under this project, which is the TerraI generated alert and the alerts, the integrated alerts from the Global Forest Watch. And what they were doing was using the Collectors Online platform to validate monthly alerts. It's not only validating, but also giving feedback on the drivers of deforestation as well. And when the alerts to be validated on Collectors Online are a bit ambiguous, they would also go to the field and collect data. And they are also using the Forest Watcher also to locate and respond to drivers of change. The other point, which I also raised on the question in the Q&A box, is related to EUDR, and this is because we've seen interest and requests regarding how to use already, because I mean this is in terms of time and in terms of the need to deliver on EUDR is quite intense. We were thinking of how we could use already available resources and systems at least to meet this requirement in due time. And as part of that, we were seeing how it would be best, for instance, to use already existing systems at a national level to identify if a certain landscape is free from producing, for instance, coffee is free from deforestation. And at a participatory forest management level, where we have delineated space that are meant to be conserved, to make sure that these are not deforested from production of coffee, for instance, we were thinking of, utilizing near real-time alerts, depending on, of course, the frequency and resolution. And so, and I was wondering if there has been any experiences in the room related to that, because, as I said, depending on the availability of resources and time pressure, there is interest to utilize that, or it's been explored, at least in Ethiopia case. And I was just wondering if there was any experiences. And once again, thank you for making this platform, and looking forward to learn from many others on this topic. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kalkaran. That's a good question, and I see your question there in the Q&A indeed as well. I don't know if anyone else would like to come in and voice any other thoughts on that question, or any of the panelists would like to respond. I suppose it's early days for EUDR. Maybe we have to wait till end of December before we really find out what's going to happen and how things are going to work in practice. Very curious myself to see that angle of things.
Sarah, if you allow me, I can also ask Daniel to see if there's any comments for EUDR. Daniel, hay dos preguntas que nos gustaría saber dentro del marco de Geobosques, si tienen en sus planes el uso de esas alertas bajo la regulación de deforestación de productos de deforestación libre de la Unión Europea, EUDR. Y la segunda pregunta también compete a cuál es el proceso de validación de las alertas que son producidas dentro de la plataforma.
Ok, a ver, vamos con la primera. No solo las alertas que generamos en sí para el marco de la Unión Europea, yo diría que cualquier información de alertas va a ser de utilidad, sobre todo para el seguimiento en áreas de libre deforestación, ¿no? Definitivamente tenemos un reto, países como los nuestros, que la agricultura es muy pequeña, muy, digamos, atomizada, en menos de 5, 2, 3 hectáreas. La agricultura viene también bajo esquemas agroforestales, entonces ahí se dificulta siempre los aspectos de detección. Y mientras más herramientas tengamos y podamos verificar con todas ellas, va a contribuir mucho a los temas de seguimiento. Bienvenidas sean las herramientas que se generen, ¿no? Ya para la segunda pregunta que me hacías, nosotros buscamos mucho que retroalimentar en el tiempo, ya desde el 2017, desde el territorio la información para ir mejorando el esquema de detección. Por ejemplo, le escribía justamente a alguien que estaba preguntando, hacía esa pregunta. Por ejemplo, en las grandes áreas naturales protegidas, ya sabemos, los amigos que están dedicados a preservar estas áreas ya saben, por ejemplo, dónde existen muchos falsos positivos, ¿no? Permanentemente cada año. Entonces, esa información a nosotros nos retroalimenta y ya sabemos cuáles son las áreas donde sabemos que hay una alta probabilidad de falsos positivos. Entonces, las analizamos más a detalle y digamos que disgregamos un poco y vamos identificando esas áreas que ya sabemos que durante todos los años pueden tener eventos naturales. Entonces, vamos mejorando en el tiempo el sistema, las tenemos ya, como se dice, identificadas, y así vamos haciendo más preciso el sistema en el tiempo. Los sistemas digamos, alerta dependen mucho de la tecnología, pero no debemos dejar de lado la información que pueda venir del territorio. Siempre va a ser importante para mejorarlas en el tiempo, ¿no? Ahora con mucha, digamos, predisposición al tema de las IA, de las inteligencias artificiales, tengan siempre presente que la inteligencia artificial en su momento no va a pensar por sí sola. Siempre va a necesitar de la información que uno retroalimente. Y si esa información viene desde el territorio, en su momento sería mucho mejor. Pero bueno, siempre va a ser, digamos, importante tener esa visión de ir mejorando, de ir retroalimentando los sistemas.
Listo, muchas gracias, Daniel. Y just to give a very brief overview for EUDR, it's I mean, indeed, it's a question in process, and right now the evaluation of several tools, including deforestation alerts, will be in the end relevant. And this is particularly within the context of agricultural activities in Peru, where they are based on relatively smaller areas. So then the detection of deforestation or degradation is even like further complicated by this. So then the use of new technologies, also the use of new methods will be relevant in this context. But I think in the end, as well as the other answers in this panel, it's more a question about, okay, how they can be used. Then for the validation, about the validation, so they right now they are working in a case of iterative validation. They know which areas, for example, deforestation alerts are not picking up real quote-unquote deforestation alerts. So where are the areas with false positives? So they have identified these areas, and these areas are now being analyzed at a higher level of detail, and they are being monitored and used to improve their methods over time. And of course, the implementation of new methods is very important, but also having input from participants that have local ground knowledge is also as important. So having this base information is what is fundamental, according to Daniel's answer.
Great, thanks for that perspective, Daniel and Daniela. I can see another question in the chat, which I think would be very interesting to discuss. It's from Aristides, who's asking how to ensure accuracy and speed in the detection of small deforestation events in areas with persistent cloud cover. Johannes has already written something about radar data, but I just want to broaden this question out, because I think, are we at the point where actually the data is not really the main limitation, or in some areas is it really the main limitation which is making alerts or which is creating a barrier for making the alerts as useful as they might be? So I'm just wondering whether people can just reflect on that question, and also the broader question of where the real barriers are. Is it on the quality of the data, and if so, what are the real limitations there?
Thanks, Sarah. Can I maybe add to that? Because that also links to the question or comment from Christopher. Is there really evidence that the use of deforestation alert actually reduce deforestation and forest degradation on a country level? And I think this is an interesting question. And it's hard to really measure this because you don't have a control group on a country level. But what we have seen, for example, in countries like Brazil, I think deforestation alerts are a key component of monitoring forests, but there needs to be, of course, they need to be institutionalized, and the legislation need to be in place, depending on the willingness, of course, of governments and everything, then only you can make impact. But I think we see that there are a key component of that, and there are a component, what I mentioned, of transparency, that the general public now knows what's going on. So it's nothing you can really hide anymore. And I think that really helps. That's just something I wanted to share from my side. I think there is clear evidence that it works, but deforestation alerts alone will not lead to change. And maybe Daniel or Luis want to comment more from the countries, or other people also from the audience.
Yes, no, I totally agree with what you just said. The alerts are just the starting point, maybe, but then there's still a lot of work to be done to institutionalize them, to bring them to the level, like to the operational level, where people will actually go check and see what's happening, and to have also maybe a transparent reporting systems that basically link alerts to observation on the ground and so on. But definitely, I think there are like a key element in the structure to make it work. But that's by no means the only thing that is needed.
Daniela, can you maybe ask Daniel to share
Yes,
experience from Peru?
I've set it over the chat, pero lo puedo decir acá también. La pregunta de Christopher Ahorn acerca de si existe evidencia de que el uso de las alertas de deforestación dentro de un marco de institucionalización real en un enfoque sistemático puede reducir la deforestación y degradación forestal a nivel nacional.
A nivel nacional es bastante complicado, pero digamos, cuando tenemos, nosotros, por ejemplo, tenemos ciertas intervenciones directas con comunidades, ¿no? Ya en el marco de otras actividades diferentes al monitoreo que el Programa Nacional de Conservación de Bosques implementa, que está relacionado con compromisos de conservación de bosques con comunidades, donde el reto es justamente en el tiempo reducir el problema de deforestación en estas comunidades. Sí hemos tenido casos de éxito, porque lo que buscamos es tener un convenio con ellos en los que ellos reciban un incentivo relacionado a la conservación que reduzca la presión sobre el bosque, pero que los lleve a tener unas metas en el tiempo, que justamente si su deforestación en su momento estuvo así, reduzca y se ponga así. Entonces, sí tenemos algunos ejemplos pero a una escala nacional es bastante complicado, ¿no? Es bastante complicado porque los agentes generadores del problema son diversos, no todos responden igual y es bastante complicado, ¿no? Pero yo creo que sí hay casos puntuales de éxito que sí merecen analizarse y quizás ampliarse también, ¿no?
Okay, muchas gracias. Yes, so basically from Daniel's perspective with the geobosques and within the Peruvian context, indeed accounting for a success story at the national level is a complex thing to do, especially because all of the actors surrounding deforestation processes at large scale are being driven by different types of yes, the different conditions and different contexts. So trying to monitor and to also see a success story at the national level is quite complex. If you look into particular success cases within like smaller groups, for example, the work that they have been doing with indigenous communities has been working closely with them using the deforestation alerts in order to also give them national incentives if they see that the deforestation alerts are going down. So for at least from their perspective, the success stories can be found mostly within within smaller case studies rather than looking at the full national context.
Great. Some really good answers there. And I think I would just add to say that the value of having open and transparent data that everyone can use to see what's going on in the world, anywhere in the world with these alerts, potentially in future, if they cover all forests globally, is huge and can really help to ensure accountability for many organizations who are responsible for managing forests or taking action against illegal activities and so on. So I think the value, what we've talked about a lot is this open data, and that's hugely helpful for reducing deforestation, although it's very difficult to monitor, especially at the national level. And Johannes did mention one case study, but it wasn't at the national level, which did quantify that reduction in deforestation where near real-time monitoring systems were being used. So I see some more questions coming in the chat, and I'd just like to open it up to the participants again. If someone would like to voice a question or an answer, please raise your hand and we can unmute you and allow you to engage in the discussion. Just wait a minute in case anyone would like to do that. Otherwise, from the panelists, is there a question you would like to respond to and answer live? I see a few new questions have just arrived in. Otherwise, there's a question about the difficulties of monitoring in dry tropical forests. I think it comes up a lot. It's a limitation in many Earth observation data sets. Would someone like to respond on maybe some advances in the field which are helping in this situation, or what we can expect with maybe new satellites coming up?
I can take a quick answer to that. I mean, so the sensitivity of an alert system or any deforestation workflow methodology, the sensitivity of that to the seasonality in especially in dry tropical forests, I mean, depends on the method that you use to determine what is a change. Some methods, you know, some methods use models, so they'll take a long series of observations from the past, build a model using those long series of observations, and then assess every new observation against that model. If you're using that kind of approach in the dry forest, you should be it's less likely that you will detect seasonality as a false change, because your seasonality is built into the model that you're using to assess whether there's a change or not. So you would have that seasonal component built into your workflow, built into your system, and regular dry season dynamics should not impact that result, or should not trigger that many alerts. Some work like that, some don't work like that. But otherwise, yeah, the dry forest is challenging everywhere, and everybody's working on that to try and do the best we can to monitor the dry forest.
Yeah, at the moment, on my perspective from Global Forest Watch, we're exploring new near real-time alert systems which we can use in the dry forest areas which are currently not covered by the systems which are provided and available on Global Forest Watch. And from what I can see, we need to really investigate new systems and their quality in the dry forests area, because it's just a really challenging for monitoring. But I'm very hopeful that soon we will be able to provide global alerts to everyone through Global Forest Watch. For example, the University of Maryland have a new vegetation alert methodology which works in all vegetation types. So potentially you can put your own tree cover mask there, which could include dry forests. But again, it's about investigating the quality in these different forest types before making use of them. And I think that has to be taken on a case-by-case basis, because they work differently in different forest systems with different dynamics and so on. So that's something we are investigating and hoping to address and provide a bit of a solution to. And I think what Eric presented is also something which can be useful, where users can adapt the information to their own forest types too. I see we're coming to the end, but I would suggest if there's one question we would like to talk about before we go, we can do that, or I would like to allow the presenters maybe to close with a statement or some kind of feedback, if you have a last kind of intervention.
Yeah, I think the other question, Christoph, I also find relevant, these guidelines and experiences on how to actually do field work once alerts were received, how to follow up in the field. So is there guidelines for patrolling? And I think some of those experiences have been also collected, as maybe the report from Michaela. Sarah, if you can share that, from I think Peru, where there's some, the work with communities has been reported. So there is some experience, while there might not be direct workflow or guidelines, but experience have been changed, because I think guidelines and workflows really depend on the local situation and at the workflows that are in place in countries. But we hope to add this kind of information to the country use cases. If people now think, okay, we have a very useful and working guidelines and workflow to do that, please reach out to us. Also with other, I want to say that with other feedback and other thoughts on these guidelines, what you think maybe is worth to share, please reach out so we can edit. I'm sure you're not the only one that has the questions or that will benefit from it. So please do that. That's also my closing.
So maybe I can just then thank all the presenters. It was really great having your experiences here and your expertise to hear about your case studies and so on. So very valuable. Also, thanks to the participants. We've had some really great questions. That's really got us thinking, some things that we can certainly use when we think about next versions of these guidance, new case studies, better examples of how we can explain some of these processes and so on, that we can share that information of how alerts come from being an alert to being used in practice. But Daniela, I think I can hand over to you to give the official GFOI closing from your side.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Sarah, and I would also like to thank you and Johannes for facilitating this session, and also, of course, the speakers, Luis, Eric, Daniel. Thank you so much for your interventions, and also I just wanted to congratulate you behind the development of the GFOI guidance for the use of forest disturbance alerts, and I look forward to seeing the impact of this guidance as well. And like I mentioned like Sarah mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, this is the first of a set of GFOI R&D exchanges. So within the GFOI research component, we plan to hold these exchanges based on the current research priorities, which are forest disturbance alerts, degradation and regrowth estimation, biomass emissions factors, land use and greenhouse gas estimations, tropical wetland monitoring, and uncertainty assessments. So if you have if anybody in the audience has a particular topic in mind that they would like to that they would think fits very well, like one of the topics that I've mentioned, then please don't hesitate to reach out to me, to Sarah, or to Johannes. And the time and date of the next R&D exchange will be announced in GFOI communication channels, just as you heard about this R&D exchange. And yes, again, I would like to thank the presenters, facilitators, also Madison behind the scenes from the GFOI, and of course participants. And indeed, like Sarah said, they have given us a lot of food for thought. So with that, I wish everybody good day, good night, and I close the session. Thank you.